Thank you.
If you want that, go for it.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm going to talk a little bit today about loving the unlovable. And and quite often we find ourselves in circumstances where in our own experience with our lives, there are parts of ourselves that we don't like. There are parts of ourselves that we reject. There are parts of ourselves that we cannot stand or ignore or deny. Sometimes this is considered to be an inner critic or an inner judge. And sometimes it's an over-exuberant inner cheerleader. So there are times in which we don't feel authentic with ourselves, where we diminish ourselves or we hold ourselves back. We have quite a capacity in this world to really bring a lot of who we are if we trust ourselves. And the people that I work with, my clients, are typically women who've been abused, suffering from trauma or PTSD, or men and women struggling with depression, anxiety, or a sense of worthlessness. Creating connections within themselves about who they are and why they're worthy is what I work with. And what it comes down to is having an inner dialogue with those parts of you that you tend to deny, to ignore, to dismiss, to refuse to acknowledge, and understanding what it is that they're bringing to you. It's a gift. They're here to protect you. They're here to support you. They're here to keep you safe. But because we deny them or we ignore them, because we refuse them, they end up acting like a 5-year-old who didn't get their way and they throw a tantrum. They get really loud, they get really rude. And so we tend to put them in a place where we don't respect them. But really it's a part of us. It's a part of ourselves that we're denying, that we're disrespecting. And if there's an opportunity to create a healthy relationship with that part of you and how it can support you, it can actually enhance you and develop your wholeness of self into a great experience of living life. Whenever a client of mine comes into my office struggling with who they are and how they're going to live their life on their own, it comes down to knowing that they're worth it, that they can love themselves just as they are, having made the choices that they've made. And each of us has that same opportunity to make mistakes and to pick ourselves up. And this inner dialogue with these parts of ourselves is an acceptance that they're there to support us, that they're there to protect us and bring us a sense of reassurance, a sense of home. When I work with clients using hypnosis, quite often what I find is that they have their own truth and their own wisdom that is relevant and meaningful for them to adhere to understand, and it can make immediate changes in their lives, where they can go home and make changes with their children, with their relationships, with their careers. And when I work with them in a shamanic manner, quite often what happens is they receive parts of themselves that had been missing. Sometimes it's a lighthearted innocence. Sometimes it's an ability to behave more as a responsible adult, doing the right thing for themselves, making those hard decisions. Sometimes it means leaving your husband or your wife. And sometimes it means quitting that long-time career that you've depended on, but was harming you. And when I work with somebody using Reiki, most often what I find is that a general sense of peace and calm and gratitude washes over them for their own experience of themselves. Quite often they're in a lot of pain. Most often they're struggling with cancer or fibromyalgia, and they're having a hard time just making it through a day. And when they receive Reiki, what they're able to find is that brief moment when their body isn't betraying them, where they can feel at peace with the life that they're living, and they can find hope again about waking up another day. And for those that are on hospice, when I work with them, it helps them to transition, to accept that the life they lived, to tell the stories that they needed to tell, and to return to whom they see as their creator with a peaceful heart, with an open heart, and with a trust. Quite often what we find in the life that we live, with the choices that we make, is that we have regrets. Loving the unlovable is loving those parts of yourselves that allow you to live with these regrets, allow you to accept those parts of you that made those choices, and to love them. They were getting a need met also, whether it was insecurity or fear or uncertainty. These parts of us are also working really hard to be fulfilled. And because we don't have healthy relationships with them, quite often they behave in a way that we feel is embarrassing or disrespectful, or we don't know how to trust them. And so if we were to open up a dialogue with them to understand what it is that they need, most often a sense of reassurance, most often a sense of just being heard and acknowledged. And we can find that what they offer us is a way to integrate more wholly into who we are, an ability to be with ourselves without feeling safe and to trust that we're okay, an ability to be with somebody else who's struggling, not knowing what to say to them, and to feel like what we have to offer is enough. It provides an opportunity for us to give our hearts not to each other, or not just to each other, but also to ourselves. It creates an opportunity for self-love that so many of us are craving, an opportunity for self-respect that quite often at times at night when you're alone with your own thoughts, there's a sense of restlessness that can come. This is the opportunity where you can hear what it is that's happening underneath, that allows you to embrace that vulnerable part of you and let it know that it's okay, that you can work together to feel secure, that you can work together to feel safe as you make more and more choices as an adult, doing things that are new and different and scary, having to interact in business and in relationship in ways that are uncomfortable. Yes? Higher up? Sorry. Okay, thank you. So working with the unlovable parts of yourself is a way to bring about a wholeness, an authenticity that you can bring into your relationships and into your business. And this comes down to having a dialogue with those parts, understanding why when you're going to try something new, some part of you is always holding you back. Some part of you is resisting this amazing opportunity that you've accepted and is terrifying at the same time. When you can find out why it's terrified, you can work with it to enhance you, to enhance your experience, to bring more opportunity to the opportunity that you've accepted for yourself. When you allow that part of you to continue to sabotage you, you're working 3 times as hard to achieve the simplest task. And when we come into this life, we come with these amazing gifts, but we have a hard time letting ourselves shine. There's a lot of uncertainty that we come across throughout our lives, a lot of disrespect that we come across in our lives. And quite often it comes from the outside in, but then there comes a time when it comes from the inside also. What hypnosis offers is an opportunity to work through these experiences without having to retell your story over and over. It's a way of finding out how to be in an experience with yourself that is authentic and immediate, that is loving and unconditional. Whereas when you're constantly telling your story over and over, you're reaffirming the story in the way that it's told each time. And for some people, you're actually re-traumatizing yourself over and over because it seems as if the story always ends the same way. The story doesn't have to continue in that same way. The story can be rewritten. It can be retold. And it can be re-experienced. One where you actually have options. One where you can choose an opportunity for change. When working in a shamanic setting, a client quite often experiences an energetic shift in their body. There's not a lot of logic that goes along with this. And when a body begins to re-experience itself in a new way, it confuses the mind. And this is exactly what creates an opportunity to change that story. As men and women who go through life struggling from abuse or from disease, where they feel like they have no control or they can't affect their experience, these are opportunities to create a here and now where there's a wholeness and there's a sense of hope. These are opportunities where you can be struggling and suffering and hurting and feel lost and at the same time feel found. Where you can feel like you're at home in yourself, where you can feel safe even if there are things going on around you that compromise that. When working with Reiki, what often happens is there creates a sense of connection. And when struggling with trauma and abuse, there's a deep disconnect that happens. And it's not just a disconnect with the one that's hurting them, but it's a disconnect from within. You disconnect from your own ability to trust yourself to make the decisions that allow you to be safe. And sometimes leaving abuse is scarier than staying with it, because being abused is familiar. And being on your own and using your own resources to depend on yourself is really scary. Loving the unlovable gives you the opportunity to make those choices to walk into the unknown, to walk into trusting yourself, that you can have what it takes to walk away from hurt and to walk into hope, even if it means standing up for something that you've never stood before, and that is yourself. When working with clients who feel like that they're at their last limit, they're giving up life, they're giving up hope, they're drinking, they're doing drugs, they're afraid to feel. Hypnosis and Reiki and shamanic, all of these are opportunities to be inside of themselves once again and to feel safe. Each one of these is an opportunity to create an environment inside their own awareness where it's okay that they were where they were. There's nothing wrong with the choices that they've made because they help them to get from one place to another. But they can also continue moving forward. They don't have to stay where they're at. What I often find is that when a client doesn't trust themselves, it's their own mind, their own ego, refusing to listen to their heart. And building a bridge between the head and the heart is the foundation of a whole connection of self, where if the heart were the guide and the mind the servant, the life that that person leads becomes authentic and meaningful and incredibly powerful. When the heart is telling the truth and the mind can respect it, that's when that life begins to change. And if they're a parent, that's when their children's lives begin to change. Building that bridge from the head to the heart, where the heart is the king or the queen, and the mind is the servant. It's a very valuable servant, but it makes a terrible leader. But if the heart were to take the opportunity to acknowledge the mind for all of its creativity and all of its ability, all that it can do for it, for the wholeness of self, the mind is then empowered and appreciated and ready to do more. The heart is the guide. It is the truth of our soul. And when the mind is honored for what it can bring about, what it can create, what the heart is asking for, then that life transforms and hope is reborn. And quite often when that hope returns, the illnesses they were struggling with no longer matter. And the abuse that they were struggling with no longer is the forefront of their life, because they have new things to focus on. They have joy in their life. They have security. And they have courage. Bringing hypnosis and reiki and shamanic services to the community has transformed our community. Watching clients go from a loss and despair to enrolling in college, to changing careers, to getting out of their bed, to stopping drinking, and teaching your children how to live again, enrolling them in classes. Loving the unlovable is an opportunity that each one of us has just by being with ourselves and with our own thoughts and listening into what it is that they are asking of us. What do they need us to acknowledge about who we are as people? What is it that they need us to understand about what they're efforting towards? And what can we do to support that? All within yourself. This opportunity to grow and develop into a whole self allows you to build that bridge within, and it can also build the bridge in connection with others. Do you have any questions? Yes.
So you're talking about 3 different processes.
Mm-hmm.
Explain the differences between them.
Hypnosis works with the subconscious. Yeah. I'm speaking of 3 different processes, and he asked that I describe or explain the differences between the 3. And so hypnosis is a process of working with the subconscious mind. So these are patterns that were established in us as a young child through our family beliefs, our societal beliefs and behaviors. They develop a sense of who we are and how we behave. And quite often, if we end up in a circumstance when we were young, where we make a belief or a decision that allows us to be safe in that circumstance, we then apply that to every circumstance going forward. What happens is when we're young, we don't have a lot of resources within ourselves for clarity or for making change. We're just cause and effect. As adults, we have a rational mind in place, and we have an ego in place, and we have discernment. And so the conscious mind as an adult has a lot of conflict with that subconscious mind and all of those habits and patterns that were developed to keep us safe. And what hypnosis is an opportunity to reassess those subconscious beliefs and patterns to establish what is true now, not what was true back then. And when you can understand what is true now for yourself, your behaviors begin to change. Your experience of yourself begins to change. You begin to trust yourself in what you feel and think, and then you begin to trust others in how they behave with you also. In shamanic services, this is a much more etheric or spiritual experience, so it really comes down to an energetic vibration, where there could be this sense of being heavy or dark or stuck or frustrated, but it's unexplainable at times, and we just know that something's not right with how we are. We don't feel open and free. So in shamanic work, we focus specifically on that one area that seems to be stuck or dark or frustrated, and we elicit from that what is going on. We let it tell its own story, and then we cleanse it and purify it using crystals and rocks and rattles and smudges. It's a southern Peruvian tradition, an Incan tradition. It's an ancient tradition that entails journeying on a spiritual level, almost like dreaming with an intent, and bringing back soul parts that may be lost through trauma or releasing parts that have been attached to us that don't belong to us and affect us in a negative way. And Reiki is an energy healing technique that harnesses all of the energy of the earth and all of the energy of the universe, filters them through the heart of the practitioner, and provides them to the client unconditional access to all of the energy that allows the client to receive an experience of unconditional love and peace, where aches and pains no longer hurt, where their body feels lighter, more comfortable, incredibly relaxed. And when their body relaxes, their nervous system relaxes, which then allows the ease of healing to enter into all of the layers of the cells of the body, where quite often when working with clients with cancer, they'll come into my office heavy, exhausted, unable to sleep, in constant pain, and they'll find themselves sleeping peacefully for 50 minutes on the table. And that is when true healing begins, because their body is no longer resisting its own experience of itself, and it can experience pure love, even when it's sick, even when it's suffering and struggling. Are there any other questions? Thank you.
I'd like to present you with a certificate of appreciation from the club for speaking to us this morning, and also as part of our appreciation, it includes speaking of polio this morning, it includes a donation to help vaccinate 10
thank
children
you.
around the world. So,
Thank you.
there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
What's your last name?